The New York Rangers desperately need more edge and more energy next season. So, should they make a run at Sam Bennett? We debate.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1316 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in what's become obviously something of an offseason tradition here on Locked On New York Rangers, we are turning our attention to unrestricted free agents from around the league that could make some sense for the Rangers, some guys that the Rangers might want to think about making a run at, some guys that could really improve this team going forward in some cases. And in some other cases, we're going to look at some free agents around the league who maybe there's some buzz, maybe there's some hype, but maybe it's not the best move for the Rangers to make. And we begin, the first player we're going to debate here is going to be Sam Bennett. We already discussed Mitch Marner in a recent episode. I believe it was 2 episodes ago, right after the Toronto Maple Leafs were eliminated. So if you want my thoughts on Marner, you can go back 2 episodes and check that out. But for today, once again, we begin with Sam Bennett. We'll have a couple of other UFAs to discuss a little bit later in today's episode. But for a lot of Ranger fans, this is the guy. And it's not hard to see why, as far as like the ideal free agent target for the New York Rangers this offseason. Obviously, there's some scoring there, but you think Sam Bennett, you think toughness, edge, nastiness, snarl, straight line hockey that the Rangers need to play a heck of a lot more of than certainly we saw this past season. Whether or not the Rangers can actually afford Bennett or not, that's a different story, and we'll get to that shortly here as well. But it's very, very easy to see why so many Ranger fans covet this guy, and myself included. I would love to add a Sam Bennett type player to this Ranger team, although considering the contract that he might be looking at, might be very, very difficult for the Rangers to pull it off. And even if they do, that might be just about it as far as free agent spending for, I mean, who knows how many years. There is some money opening up next offseason, but if you give a big contract to Bennett, that's obviously going to be, you know, a big dent in whatever cap space you would have next offseason. But, you know, to kind of go through the background with Sam Bennett, he is now 28 years old, so getting into his late 20s, but obviously still quite young, and I think a good investment for just about any team that were to sign him. He plays center and left wing. Now, the Rangers do have an abundance of both, but there are always ways around that, and I think that, you know, you're probably going to see a situation where Mika Zibanejad is going to be playing right wing going forward, assuming that he's back this upcoming season. And on top of that, you look at left wing, it looks deep now, but, you know, Panarin's entering the last year of his contract. Kreider could be traded, and even if he's not, he's only got 2 years left on his contract. Lafreniere is technically a left winger, although I think at this point, a lot of us think of him more so as a right winger since that's where he's mostly been playing the last couple of seasons. So you can always make the pieces fit. You can always find a way to make it work, especially for a player the caliber of Sam Bennett. It must be said, this is a guy that toes the line and certainly crosses it at times as well. The sucker punch to Marchand in last year's playoffs was just unbelievable. Even by like, you know, dirty NHL play kind of standards, that was brutal. And, you know, I know people don't like Marchand, but getting sucker punched in the side of the head is something that I don't think really anybody deserves. And then you've got the hit to Anthony Stolarz in this year's postseason against the Maple Leafs, kind of one of those accidentally on purpose kind of deals. I mean, here's the thing with a play like that. I could buy the fact that maybe it was an accident if it was a player that didn't have the extensive track record that Sam Bennett does. Once you've done the amount of things that he's done over the years and come under scrutiny as many times as he has, you lose the benefit of the doubt, at least for me. And I don't know. To me, it kind of looked like one of those things where he sort of looked like he knew what he was doing on that play. And I'm not condoning dirty play at all, but the Rangers do need somebody with more edge. They do need more of those players that as an opponent, it's like, okay, we got to keep an eye on that guy. We got to be aware when he's on the ice. We got to keep our heads up. We got to be ready to go to battle. And right now, especially this past season, the Rangers just did not have enough of those guys. They were few and far between. And even the ones that they did have, you know, I know a lot of people would point to Matt Rempe, and that's true and everything. But I mean, how many minutes a night is Matt Rempe going to play? You need a guy that's going to be a prominent member of this team that brings some snarl, brings some edge, brings some nastiness. And hopefully you can toe that line and stay on the clean side of it more often than not. But you do need guys that are difficult to play against in this league, especially come playoff time. Obviously, that's a moot point for the Rangers right now because they didn't make the playoffs this year. We all know that, though. As far as like the overall physicality, I mean, we know all about that. Again, he does do a decent amount of scoring, does Sam Bennett. But you think about Bennett, you think about the physicality first. 1,294 hits in 691 career games. He'll fight too. We saw him fight Brady Tkachuk in the Canada versus United States game at the Four Nations. That was one of those first couple of fights right off of the opening faceoff there. I mean, there were 3 in the first 9 or 10 seconds, whatever it was. We saw him get into a fight with Jacob Trouba all the way back in 2017. Bennett was on the Flames at the time. Trouba was on the Jets, and some big punches being thrown. Trouba was bleeding quite a bit after that fight was over, so I'd give the edge to Bennett in that one. And, Bennett, as far as offensive stats are concerned, again, he's not like an offensive juggernaut, obviously, but he is somebody that will contribute. I think most people see him as a middle six forward type player, but you look at his career numbers as far as offense is concerned: 691 regular season games, 162 goals, 174 assists, and 336 points. So he will contribute there as well. And he's somebody that also steps up his game when it comes to the postseason. I'll elaborate on that in just a little bit. We'll get to his, playoff resume. But one thing that I have to mention here is that I am worried about the price tag when it comes to Sam Bennett and whether the Rangers can even be competitive, whether they'll be priced right out of it. And honestly, at a certain point, if it even makes sense to give Bennett the kind of contract that he honestly might end up commanding. I think hockey fans right now, Ranger fans and otherwise, are at least somewhat underestimating what his next contract is going to look like. I see predictions of 6 years at $5.5 million, 6 years at $6 million, somewhere in that ballpark. Honestly, guys, I could see it being more like $7 million a season, $7.5 million per season, maybe even creeping up on $8 million. And that does seem like a lot, but GMs around the league covet players like this. And you add that to the fact that, again, this is a but it is a weaker free agent market than we're used to seeing. There aren't a lot of high-end superstar players available. The one true superstar that's out there is Marner, and we saw the way that he just played in the playoffs, and people are really down on him. I don't want him coming anywhere near the Rangers. He'll still get a payday, and he's earned that, through the amount of offensive production that he's had in his career. But I mean, beyond that, where are the superstar players? They just aren't really there. And players looking to improve their team, they're going to have to overpay to get some of these, top free agents in this year's class. Also to consider is the fact that there will be a jump in the salary cap, which is both good news and bad news for the Rangers if you're looking for this team to land Sam Bennett. The reason why it's good news is because it would make a player like Sam Bennett, even if he gets a bigger contract than expected, a little bit more affordable going forward, as the salary cap continues to rise and rise and rise as it's been doing. But the bad news is that it also results in a bigger contract for Sam Bennett, and it results in other teams realizing that trend as well, the salary cap going up, and realizing that, hey, we can afford this guy, and we can afford him this season, and he'll get more and more affordable as the years go by because the salary cap will still keep going higher. So, yeah, Bennett's cap hit stays the same, but the percentage that he would be taking up of the salary cap, that will go down with every passing year if the salary cap continues to trend in the direction that it has. So, I mean, I don't know, man. Good all-around player like this with some serious bite, some serious edge. Obviously, has been to the 2 Stanley Cup finals the last 2 years. He might make it back to another one. He's won a Stanley Cup. GMs love players like this. And I think there's going to be a lot of suitors for Sam Bennett. And it's entirely possible that he ends up getting a contract that the Rangers just can't afford or certainly wouldn't feel comfortable giving out to Sam Bennett. With that being the case, if you still are on board with Sam Bennett and you say, no, we need a guy like this, Bennett's my guy, let's make this thing happen. Here's how I would expect the Rangers to try to play it if they are in on Bennett. I think you take a similar approach that you took with Vincent Trocheck, years ago, a couple of years ago. You give him a longer contract for less money per season. The most amount of years that you can give to a UFA from another team is 7. It might require the Rangers, if they're going to be in on Bennett and be competitive here, giving him the full 7 years, which isn't terrible because that would only take him through his age 35 season. So he's getting up there a little bit, but certainly not ancient. And that's the name of the game. When you're trying to sign a free agent in general, a lot of times you're going to have to give him a little bit more money than you'd be comfortable with. You're going to have to give him a couple more years than you might like as well, because you got to find a way to, separate yourself from the pack, from the other teams that might be in on a unrestricted free agent, such as Sam Bennett. So I'd expect them to go to Vincent Trocheck route if they're trying to get him to try to keep the average annual value as low as possible. You give him a whole bunch of years, and you hope that, the total amount of money then that would make Bennett happy. All this is not even considering the fact that he could end up staying with Florida. I mean, they've obviously done a bunch of winning. He might win another Stanley Cup this season. At this point, I don't see how you look at any team other than the Panthers as the favorites to win this thing. So he might end up staying there. We'll see. But, there's a lot to consider here when it comes to adding Sam Bennett. The costs chief among them. Something else that I think merits some consideration here is the amount of players on the Rangers that you would have to move to even have a shot to be able to afford Sam Bennett. I've mentioned this before, but you'd have to trade probably Chris Kreider. You'd have to move on from Keandre Miller, not give him a new contract. Carson Soucy becomes a trade candidate as well. That would open up some cap space. Trading guys like Panarin and Mika, that does not sound all that feasible given that they both have full no-move clauses. But you're going to have to make some moves to be able to afford Sam Bennett. And even then, it's going to be tough to fit him in under the salary cap. Again, I really think he's going to get a much bigger contract than people are anticipating. One other thing I have to say in Bennett's favor here, though, proven playoff performer. I mentioned this. I alluded to this a couple of minutes ago. We know that the Stanley Cup playoffs are tailor-made for somebody like Sam Bennett and that hard-hitting, in-your-face physical style that he plays. But even offensively, he steps it up come postseason. For his career in the regular season, he averages about a half point per game. It's just a shade under that. For the playoffs, 96 games. So it's not a small sample size. We're talking a full season of NHL hockey there and a couple of games left to spare. 96 games, 31 goals, 34 assists for a total of 65 points in 96 playoff games. And I'm realizing now that they played last night and they won. I did not update this stat since that happened. But bottom line, it's in the same ballpark. And that is approximately 0.68 points per game. So his scoring goes up by a decent point come playoff time for Sam Bennett. So as far as like a verdict here, I don't think this is going to happen. But if you want a really good all-around player that brings that toughness, brings that meanness, I think Sam Bennett is probably your guy. But I just think the price is going to be quite a bit higher than people are currently anticipating. But in just a second, we've got an alternative to Sam Bennett. He's not on the same level, but he's somebody that does have some of the same attributes, brings some similar qualities to the rink. That is going to be Trent Frederic, and we're going to talk about him in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game better before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You look at the New York Knicks right now in the conference final for the first time in 25 years. It's obviously very exciting. I think all the Ranger magic somehow got transferred to the Knicks this season, but be that as it may, there's a lot of interesting player props. Jalen Brunson is doing his thing that you can check out on FanDuel. Definitely a good time to visit that website and see what you can do there. If you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, big shout out to the everydayers as always. I think in our next episode, what we might do, it's going to be our last episode of the week, so we'll do something fun. We'll relive the best 5 Ranger wins from this past season. I know it was a rough season, even in a pretty brutal campaign, though. There were some fun moments. There were some exciting wins in the mix there. So we'll do that. We'll also get to the 5 worst losses at some point, too, which I feel like in a weird way, people might enjoy that even more because I think it will be cathartic for a lot of us. But that's for another day. For right now, let's keep our focus on unrestricted free agents from around the league and another player that I like quite a bit, and that is Trent Frederic. He's very, very high on my list, and I'm still going through the entire class and trying to figure out who's affordable and who might be a good fit for this team. But when you consider, value versus price tag and value versus length of contract, Trent Frederic is very, very high for me. And I'll get to the reasons why in just a second. But as far as the background, because he's not like a superstar player, I think we all know that. But he's 27 years old, plays center, plays left wing, former first-round pick by the Bruins in 2016. He went number 29 overall that year. He was actually traded by Boston to Edmonton in a 3-team deal that also included the Devils. The Devils had to retain some of Trent Frederic's salary to make that thing happen, and they were compensated with, I believe, a draft pick, if I'm not mistaken. But the bottom line, Frederic is finishing up a 2-year deal that carried a cap hit of $2.3 million per season, and he's set to be an unrestricted free agent for the first time. Full disclosure here on Trent Frederic, I could not stand him when he was a member of the Bruins, but that's the idea, and I mean that as a compliment, because just like I mentioned with Sam Bennett, it's true of Trent Frederic here as well. The Rangers need more guys that are difficult to play against. The Rangers need more guys that are going to be a headache for the opposition. The Rangers need more guys where you got to keep your head on a swivel when they're on the ice. Guys that feel just a little bit dangerous, guys that, toe that line ever so carefully as far as, what's clean and what might be over the edge a little bit or over the line a little bit. With Trent Frederic, you think of, as far as like him potentially coming to the Rangers, he would go from somebody that I don't think many of us really liked that much when he was on the Bruins to being somebody that I think could become an instant fan favorite. He's another one of those guys that's very hard hitting, plays that straight line style, and will get in your face and will drop the gloves when the occasion calls for it. Somebody that can certainly get under your skin if you're a member of the opposing team. But again, that is what the Rangers need. The Rangers need more guys like that will drive the opponents crazy from time to time. They need a loose cannon or two on this roster, not guys that just kind of, you look at this last season, guys that kind of just go through the motions. That's what it was in too many games. There just weren't enough guys out there mixing it up, enough guys that were bringing that fire and that energy and that nastiness every single night. There just was not nearly enough of that. And I think Trent Frederic can give you some of that. And if Sam Bennett becomes too expensive, if the contract's too long, if the contract is too rich for the Rangers, Frederic is not on Bennett's level. But again, he's kind of Bennett light, if you will. Bennett Jr., whatever you want to call it, plays that hard-hitting, blue-collar style. He's been in a lot of fights with the Rangers over the years. Maybe that's part of the reason why I don't like him so much. But we actually saw him drop the gloves with Trouba last season. Not the one that just concluded, but the season before. The short fight, but a couple of big punches each way. There was also an incident, last year, Pierre Laviolette's first year with the Rangers, for reference, where there was like a 2-on-2 fight between the Rangers and Bruins. We had Braden Schneider absolutely just cream Frederic as Frederic was entering the offensive zone. So that was awesome. Schneider actually ended up fighting Greer because Greer basically jumped him. And then Frederic got into it with Barclay Goodrow. And I would give an edge to Frederic in that fight. We also saw Frederic fight Brendan Lemieux when Lemieux was on the Rangers all the way back in 2021. Just haymakers both ways. We saw, this doesn't involve the Rangers, but we saw Frederic also fight Tom Wilson. So this is somebody that's not afraid. He's not going to back down. And again, that is the very description of the type of player that the Rangers could really use right now. And he can contribute a little bit offensively as well. If we're being honest here, you probably wish there was a little bit more offense to his game. He's basically a third of a point per game player for his career. 338 games, 55 goals, 54 assists, 109 points, while averaging 12 minutes, 24 seconds of ice time per night, 157 block shots, 672 hits. I do feel like maybe there's been times where on the Bruins where he's been buried on the depth chart a little bit. And on one hand, if you're good enough, you force your way up the depth chart, right? But you got to remember, some of those Bruins teams that he was playing on were absolutely loaded. We saw just a couple of seasons ago where they had was it the best record in NHL regular season history, or maybe the most points in NHL regular season history? It was right there, and they lost in the first round, so that was pretty funny. But yeah, Frederic, it's hard to climb too high up a depth chart for a team that's doing that's setting, the all-time record for most points in a season. So he was on some, like I said, absolutely loaded Bruins teams, and maybe that prevented him from getting a more prominent role. And now he's with the Oilers, but he's a free agent after the season ends. Maybe with the Rangers, he'll be given a little bit more of a chance to stake out a bigger role for himself. You look at the top six, I think it would be difficult for him to crack it. I don't think it would be impossible, though, depending on some other moves that the Rangers might make this offseason. Obviously, if Kreider gets traded, which may or may not happen, we don't know. But if that does happen, that opens up a spot. I would prefer it to go to one of the Rangers' homegrown prospects, whether we're talking, Offman or Perot or whoever it might be. But the bottom line, the door would at least be open. The door would be cracked for Trent Frederic to carve out a big role for himself on the Rangers. And again, I think it's an affordable contract as well. I don't know exactly what he's going to get. There'll be probably a raise on what he's making right now, just $2.3 million per season. But I think it'll still be within reason. I don't think it'll be nuts. You might be talking like $3.75 million a year. I mean, does that sound about right for Trent Frederic? I think that's about where he would come in, and I think that would be certainly affordable. Maybe not even that high. Maybe we're talking like $3 million, $3.5 million, somewhere in that ballpark. That could be money well spent for a Ranger team that, doesn't have a ton of money to do it. And I don't think you would have to go crazy with the length of the contract either. I just don't think that Trent Frederic is going to go out there and command a 6-year, 7-year deal. I just don't see that happening. I mentioned his offense just a second ago. There's one thing I want to get back to here. He was contributing more and more offensively every season for 4 straight seasons with the Bruins until this past year. And of course, this past year, the floor fell out from underneath the Bruins. Everything collapsed. Everything fell apart. It was a mess, and they ended up selling and dealt Trent Frederic around the trade deadline. But his offensive numbers were slowly creeping up there, just little by little with the Bruins. Again, not like dazzling, incredible numbers, but respectable third line type numbers from Trent Frederic, toward the end of his tenure with the Bruins, this current season notwithstanding. He could win a Stanley Cup. That's the other thing, too. He's played in all 11 playoff games for the Oilers. He's got a goal and an assist in that time. His goal was actually the series clincher in the Game 6 win over the Kings in the first round. So he could end up with a Stanley Cup. As far as his role with the Rangers, I mean, I would see him probably like a third liner. I think mostly a bottom 6 type player, but somebody that could play the top 6 in a pinch, and somebody that might honestly have some top 6 potential, especially if you've got a line in the top 6, whether it's your top line, your second line, whatever it might be. Maybe there's 2 Rangers on said line that are good offensive players and will produce offensively, but they don't really do the dirty work. Maybe Frederic would fit in great and be a great compliment to a line like that. I'm talking myself into this guy even more than I already was. Like I really like this idea, given the fact that I don't think it's going to be too rich of a contract. I don't think it's going to be too long of a contract either. You can keep it within reason. He's still just 27 years old. Give him like a 3-year deal. That takes him only to age 30. I mean, that could be a steal. I think this is somebody that could be a steal on the open market, and somebody that teams that missed out on Sam Bennett might look to target. I would hope that, hopefully he's a little bit under the radar, and hopefully the Rangers can kind of just, make their move and get him before, anybody else overpays for him or, whatever the situation might be there. But I really do like Trent Frederic as a target for the Rangers this offseason. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. We're actually going to get to a free agent defenseman who I think that, frankly, is a little bit overhyped. I'm just being honest. I have to keep it real on here. We'll get to that player in just a second. All right, let's go keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Going to go ahead and close out today's episode by talking about another unrestricted free agent, somebody that has some buzz and somebody that I think will probably benefit in being sort of a big fish in a small pond, both literally and figuratively here, because, it is kind of a weaker free agent market class this offseason. But that player is Ivan Provorov. I got to be honest, guys. I'm not really getting all the hype here. I don't know why so many Ranger fans are so gung-ho about adding Ivan Provorov. He's not a bad player, but I think that he's somebody that, as I've mentioned in recent episodes, kind of like in passing, I feel like he is destined to be overpaid due to the weaker free agent market that we're seeing right now. He is one of the better left-handed defensemen that's available. I think the two that a lot of Ranger fans have their eye on right now are Provorov and Gavrikov, and certainly we'll discuss Gavrikov, in a future episode. But with Provorov, we'll start with the good stuff, because again, fair trial for everybody on here, right? There are some things to like. Very durable. That's the first thing that really jumps out. He has played all 82 games for the last 3 seasons. The season before that, he played in 79 games. So he's always on the ice. He's always out there doing his thing and logging big minutes pretty much every night. He's got good size at 6'1", 213 pounds. For a defenseman, he does give you some offense. We're talking 77 goals and 205 assists for a total of 282 points in 696 games. Also very mobile and a good skater and versatile as well. He can play on the power play. He can also play on the penalty kill. So he can give you some good special teams play as well. So he's a good player. I'm not denying that. However, there's some other things I've noticed as well. And again, this is on top of the fact that I think this is somebody that is destined to be overpaid by a team that is desperate to add a defenseman and has to overpay for somebody in a weak free agent market class. But physicality, there is none. There's not really that much physicality from Ivan Provorov, especially when you consider his height and his weight, his size, at least in terms of hits. And I realize there's other ways to measure physicality. You know, will he clear people out of the crease and whatnot? But in terms of hits, there's not a whole lot there. 696 games, just 787 hits for Provorov. It's not that much when you consider that he has averaged 23 minutes and 46 seconds of ice time per night. We're talking basically one hit per game, one hit every 23 minutes or 21 minutes, whatever that averages out to. And on top of that, his physicality is going in the wrong direction because 2 years ago, which was his last season with Philadelphia, and now he's played 2 seasons with Columbus, Provorov had 97 hits in 82 games. Then last year with the Jackets, just 66 hits in 82 games. And then this season with the Jets, only 28 hits by Provorov in 82 games. This despite the fact that he's averaging 23 minutes, 21 seconds of time on the ice per night. What was he doing? Like, where are the hits? Where's the physicality, right? I don't throw this name around out there lightly. Monarch Money. He always came under fire from Ranger fans, and I think somewhat justifiably so, because he was an absolute giant out there, and he's bigger than Provorov, but he never used that to his advantage. He was not a physical defenseman, and he really came under fire from Ranger fans. It got to the point where they would boo him anytime that he touched the puck. And I'm not saying Provorov is going to work out that badly. I don't think he would if he came to the Rangers, but there's some similarities there. This guy's big, and at least going by his hit total, he's not taking advantage of it out there. So there's that to consider. There's also this to consider. The guy's a turnover machine. I don't know how else to say it. When you look at his giveaways against takeaways, and those can be a little bit fickle, what exactly constitutes a giveaway and a takeaway. Some of them are obvious, some of them not so much. You know, is this a giveaway or did he just lose a 50-50 puck and it shouldn't be a giveaway? So I get that there's some gray area there, but the Rangers don't need another turnover-prone player, and certainly not another turnover-prone defenseman, based on what we saw from some of the Rangers' blue liners this past season. You know, people get really mad at K'Andre Miller for his turnovers, and again, I think there's times where it is warranted. Miller, at the very least, though, he does have a lot of giveaways. He gets a lot of takeaways, too. I believe he led the Rangers this past season in takeaways, and when you look at the ratio for K'Andre Miller's career, 257 takeaways against 281 giveaways. So it's not that far away from being, you know, a 50-50 split. And there have been seasons for Miller where he's had more takeaways than giveaways. But for Provorov, in his career, in 696 games, he has 188 takeaways against 717 giveaways. And again, I know those numbers can be a little bit fickle and there's some gray area there. I get all that. You can't tell me that like he's on the the NHL scorer, whoever's scoring these games, has it out for Provorov that badly where he ends up getting ratioed like that. 188 takeaways against 717 giveaways. And for Provorov this year, it's even worse. Are you sitting down for this? If you're driving, maybe just pull over for a quick second here. I'll give you a minute. This is his ratio. 29 takeaways against 120 giveaways. Let's again compare this to K'Andre Miller because he made a lot of mistakes this past season. He had a lot of turnovers and some, you know, really inopportune times during games. There were times where he cost the Rangers games. This was his ratio this past season for Miller. 47 takeaways against 97 giveaways. Once again, compare that to Provorov, 29 takeaways against 120 giveaways. Provorov's ratio is far worse. So, I don't know. I mean, are people just unaware of this? I'm not getting the hype. I'm not. One other thing that I'll throw out there too, because we've talked about, you know, playoff experience with certain free agents. We mentioned that with Sam Bennett. You know, playoff experience, I'm not going to like look at a player and say, well, he hasn't played a whole lot of playoff games, so that means the Rangers can't possibly sign him. But I will, if a player has played in the playoffs a lot and has had success in the playoffs, then I'll count that to their advantage. You can't do that with Provorov because he's only played 22 career Stanley Cup playoff games, 3 goals, 8 assists, -4 in that time, has not played in the postseason since 2019, 2020 with the Philadelphia Flyers. So there's not really a ton of playoff experience to speak of either. And then there's the contract. And we talked about how Bennett, he might be somebody that benefits from the weak free agent class, at least a little bit. Nobody's going to benefit from this more than Provorov. Provorov is coming off of a pretty expensive contract. 6 years that paid him $6.75 million per season. That, to me, is already way too much for Provorov, especially when you consider the Rangers' salary cap situation and the fact that they don't have a lot of money to spend anyway. I don't see the point. I don't think it's a good idea to spend almost all of it on Ivan Provorov. But he might end up getting more than that because, again, you can make the case that he's the best lefty defenseman in the free agent class. And I'm not denying that he's a good player. Overall, he's had some success, and that's all well and good. But I think this is somebody that's become overrated over the years. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know this for sure, but I think there's a decent amount of Ranger fans that saw the Ranger defenseman this past season and say, okay, my God, we need an upgrade. And you're completely right about that. Like if you were dissatisfied with what we saw from the Ranger defenseman this past season, I totally get it. But I feel like there's certain fans that just kind of see that, well, Provorov's the best guy available, so let's go get him. I don't think that's the way to go. I think the best thing you can do here, if you're the Rangers, I would like to see them add somebody in free agency, a defenseman, to bolster the blue line a little bit. But I think you look at the veteran stopgap options, somebody like Dmitry Orlov, somebody that can be had. Maybe they're a little bit older, and I know some Ranger fans aren't going to like that, and that's fine. But get somebody that you can have on a 1 or 2 year contract for a heck of a lot less money, and somebody that can basically just be a stopgap and hold down the fort until the Drew Fortescues and the EJ Emerys of the world are ready to step in there for the New York Rangers. I think that's a much better approach than what I would consider to be massively overpaying for somebody like Provorov. And it might be the same with Gavrikov too. I got to look at him a little bit closer and, see what's out there about him. But I'm out on Provorov. I was already out on Provorov after looking up all these numbers and everything and really considering every aspect of this situation here, whether we're talking his price tag, the length of the contract, the lack of cap space that the Rangers have. I'm even more out than I was before. I have no interest in Provorov, especially at the price tag that he's going to get. You guys might feel differently. Certainly feel free to let me know. But that will do it for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @JChik17. Once again, that is @JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.